When God has called you to do something or when He's given you an assignment, you will know that it's Him. You will know what you're supposed to do, and you will know exactly when it's time. You will not have to compete with anyone or fight with anyone to do what God has told you to do. He will open up a way and He will make space for you. All you have to do is trust Him and follow Him. As always, it is such a pleasure to present the Sanctuary Sunday School for the Sanctuary Academy. I want you to hit that subscribe button, but I also want you to join the channel. We have more live discussions coming up this Thursday. I'm going to do a live discussion about anger. It will be Thursday evening at 6 p.m. Central Time, so you don't want to miss that. Go ahead and join so that you can communicate with me and share. But I'm going to be talking about anger for Thrive Thursdays for self-care this week. So let's look at our lesson. Our lesson is the boy Jesus. And this is a popular lesson. It starts off in the book of Ecclesiastes, actually, in the Old Testament, talking about how there's a time and there's a season for everything under the sun. And then it drops down and says that there is a time to be silent and a time to speak. Now, when you look at the book of Ecclesiastes, by definition, the word Ecclesiastes is directed to ministry or clergy. And this is a very powerful lesson for those of us who are called to ministry. It tells us that we don't just talk all the time. There's a time when you're quiet. There's a time until you wait until you're called to speak. There's a time for you to learn. So this lesson in the book of Ecclesiastes, it's interesting that they put this here. And then we're talking about, we skip over to the New Testament in the book of Luke, and we talk about Jesus. Now, when we look, we see here that his parents, and this is something that I noticed about Mary and Joseph, that they were good, devout Jews. They followed all of the feasts, even down to Jesus' birth. The reason that Jesus was born in Bethlehem is because they had to go back there and to be taxed. And even here we see that they were here in Jerusalem at the temple at this time observing one of the feasts and customs. And that's a very important lesson from us for us because sometimes, we get a call and we just run off kamikaze and just do whatever we want. But there's order to the way that God requires us to do things. And we see that his parents followed the order and they were not out of line. And this was very important because in order for Jesus to be recognized on certain levels, he had to do certain things the right way so that he would not be discounted. So we see that his parents were here in Jerusalem at the temple and that Jesus was 12 years old at this time. And so he was there and he was in the temple. And then it says they left and they left him there. Jesus decided that he was going to stay. And they left and they walked. And they walked away and they didn't notice that he was gone. And while he was there, and when they described him at 12, it says words like wisdom, right? And the grace of God at 12 years old. And this is a powerful message too for young people. So many times as adults, we discount the callings and the wisdom and the gifts of our youth. But at 12, it said he had wisdom and he had the grace of God. And so when they left him there, he wasn't out being frivolous. He wasn't out being wild and running wild and playing. He was in the temple and he was talking to the doctors, right? And it says he was hearing them. He was listening to what they were saying and he was asking questions of them. This is what was happening while he was there. And it says that the people, they use words like astonished and amazed at the wisdom of this boy. And so the mother and the father, they left and it was a day. They had been gone a day's journey before they realized that he wasn't with them. And when you look at this, when they have these feasts, people would journey to Jerusalem from, it would be a lot of people from a lot of places. So, they could have assumed that he was with family. And they said they started to ask among their kinspeople where he was. And when they couldn't find him, they decided to go back to Jerusalem. And get this, it took them 3 days to find him. And that gives you an idea of the magnitude of the feast and the number of people that were there and everything that was going on. And again, Jesus was there and he was in this temple and he was talking to them. And as a mother would normally do, we see here that Mary scolded him a little bit and said, why would you do this? Why would you stay here like this? We've been looking for you for 3 days. I know if I didn't know where my child was for 3 days at 12, I would have just been livid. And so she goes, we've been looking for you for 3 days and we were worried. And so Jesus spoke to her, and this answer here is not disrespectful, but he did say, why are you looking for me? You ought to know what I'm doing. You understand who I am. And Jesus at this age seemed to be confused as to why they would look for him and why they would be worried, because they knew that it was time for him to be about his Father's business. But then, get this, Jesus did not challenge them. It says that he went back to Nazareth with them and he was subject to them, the boy Jesus. This was a lesson, because sometimes when we get our callings, right, and we get our anointings, then we want to challenge our leaders, our spiritual leaders, our natural parents, or whomever, and we don't want to be subject to anyone. But this example that Jesus set, he went with them and he was subject to them and he went home. And then it says that his mother kept these things in her heart, which I understand that to mean that she saw it. You know how when your children grow up and you have to look at them differently, like, whoa, okay, I'm going to have to handle him a little differently. I'm going to have to speak to her a little bit differently because I see a little bit more there. And he gained some level of respect. But at this point, when he first told them why he was there, they didn't understand. And he did not fight them and he did not challenge them at that point. He submitted. He went back. And the word says that he was subject to them. And I'm reminded of a time when I was younger and I had just started working, and I've shared many, many times that my parents, my father is a pastor, and even though he's a pastor, God has called me to a ministry of my own. So it is not for me to try to overthrow him or overturn him. I grew up working in the bishop's church, and I'm not going to drop names, but one of our prominent bishops, his daughter, she told me that. She said, look, pick your battles. She said, you don't have to ask permission for everything. She said, sometimes just go ahead and do it and wait until they tell you don't do it again. And I thought about that when I thought about Jesus. He just stayed. And then his mom scolded him for it, but he had already been there 3 days. He had already gotten in those conversations with those doctors, and he had already gathered wisdom and learning that he needed. And so sometimes there is a way to gather what you need. Sometimes what you need might not be at home. Sometimes what you need might not be at your local church. And I am in no way trying to discount anyone's local church. I still am a member of my local church. I am subject to my pastor and my father, and I do whatever that is required of me there. But God has also called me to work here. And my message is that they don't have to work against each other. The body of Christ is one body with many, many members, which is why you never hear me discuss denominations on this program. Yes, I belong to a body. Yes, I am a part of a denomination, but none of that, none of the titles, none of the positions. I had titles, I had positions, and I walked away from them because they meant nothing to me. Similarly to how Jesus stepped back in this temple, God placed a desire in me to sit at the feet of people who are concerned with the word of God. And he placed a desire in me to share that knowledge with others. The boy Jesus, you will know when it is your time to move forward. God will position you. He will open up doors. He will make ways, and he will make the transition smooth for you. Then it says that Jesus, he increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor. That means he grew up, and he grew up into to be a man. And as we know, the great man that he became, and it started at this place, the boy Jesus. And there comes a time, there is a time in all of our lives where you know that it's time to move. You know that it's time to be about your Father's business. Jesus knew that it was time, and when it's time, God will show you. He will reveal to you, and he will open up a way for you. And I challenge everybody on this week to really be about your Father's business. You know, I say all the time, if you're paying attention to what's going on now, you know that time is not long, and it is truly time to be about your Father's business. And sometimes that's going to mean being left behind. You know, you're going to miss out on some things, but everything, all things work together for the good of them that love the Lord and who are the called according to his purpose. So I challenge you, answer the call. Whatever's on your line that's keeping you disconnected from God, you need to disconnect from them, connect with God, answer the call, and be about your Father's business.